When it became close to the time when we would be leaving Turkey, Mother looked for someone who could give us some more formal schooling. One of the faculty members' wives was a former school teacher in the United States, and she agreed to give us 2 hours of classes a day. There were 5 of us children who went to her home from 9 to 11. She kept us up in our studies for the grade level we belonged in according to our age. I also took piano lessons and dancing lessons in Turkey. My piano teacher couldn't speak English, and I couldn't speak French, which was her native language, so we both could speak a little Greek, so this is how we communicated. I loved to dance and even performed in a recital at the Alhambra Theater in Smyrna on one occasion. It was a great success. We knew that we would be leaving Turkey in 1932. I was 10 and Jack was 11. Henry was still with us, but all the older boys, Arthur, Edward, Alfred, and Ralph, were in the United States. Ralph was living at the missionary home in Auburndale, Massachusetts, and going to Newton High School at the time. He was always getting into trouble, and my parents were anxious to come to America for his sake. Father had another year before his retirement, but he wanted to come and help Mother get settled in America. I remember that trip very well. We took a small ship from Smyrna to Bear at the heel of Italy. Then we boarded a train for Genoa, staying there overnight. The next day we boarded a large Cunard ocean liner for America. I can remember how special I felt because I could have delicious apples any time on the ship. We celebrated the 4th of July at sea with fireworks, singing, and dancing. The ship arrived in New York Harbor on July 5, 1932. Louise, Edward, Alfred, and Ralph met us there. Jack and I rode home in the rumble seat of Eddie's Ford coupe, while Mother and Louise came home on the train with Alfred and Henry. Father stayed in New York to tend to business. Our home at the time was an apartment Alfred had rented from his roommate at Brown. It was on Olive Street, just a short distance from the apartment Arthur and Liv had on John Street, near Brown University. Nancy was 2 and Gail was a newborn. Jack and I played with the neighborhood children, and I was scolded because I played with a black boy named Kenneth. Soon Father had to return to Turkey to teach his last year. Mother found a house for us in Norton, Massachusetts. It was a large farmhouse with 15 rooms, 8 acres of land, and 2 barns and a garage. This was during the depth of the Depression, and the family who was selling the property had lost money in the stock market. They were happy to get $3,000 cash for the home. They left a lot of curtains, silverware, and furniture. This is all the money that Father and Mother had saved, and yet they still had to buy 2 used cars, one for Alfred and Ralph to get to Providence, because Alfred was a senior at Brown and Ralph was going to country day school, and one for Mother. Mother, at age 55, had to learn to drive a car so that she could buy groceries and take us kids places. Father had to return to Turkey to finish 1 more year before he could retire. We were settled by September, in time for Jack and me to go to school in Norton Grammar School. It was a difficult beginning for me because I soon discovered that I talked and looked quite different from American children. I had a British accent, and my clothes were old-fashioned or homemade. There were not enough desks for all the children, so that I had to share one with another girl. I remember a boy in back of me whispering, "I'm going to tease you at recess." When they found out that I came from Turkey, they would make gobble noises every time Turkey was mentioned. Somehow I rose above the teasing and embarrassment and did very well in my studies. I fit right into the 5th grade without ever going to a real school before, which is a credit to Mrs. McFarland, my tutor in Turkey. I remember how very cold it was that year, 1932. We never had snow in Turkey, and while it was fun to play in the snow, it was hard to warm up afterwards. There was no heat in the bedrooms at our farmhouse. We would fill a hot water bottle and put it in the bed before getting into it. I made new friends in Norton. Audrey Wiley lived in a large home at the center of town. We were a lot alike and soon became inseparable. My brother Jack had a lot of friends, and we used to all go out together, not paired, but just as friends. We would go bowling or to the movies or to a baseball game or to the beach in the summer. When I was in the 8th grade, I got a job after school working at the Cressys, who lived in the center of town and who taught at Wheaton College. I did light housework and looked after 2 children. Mr. Cressy would drive me home afterwards, or I would call Mother to come and get me. I earned 25 cents an hour, which added up to buy a pair of shoes or some clothes which I needed. Soon I became more in demand working at other college professors' homes. Jack got a job after school working at a chicken farm nearby. On Saturdays, my job at home was to clean the house. Mother was busy with the garden, washing, cooking, etc. We only had a carpet sweeper, a broom, and a dustbin, but I always did a nice job. I took turns with Jack washing and wiping the supper dishes. Jack had the job of milking the cows twice a day, while I helped with the canning and pickling and making jams and jellies. We had a big vegetable garden and a large strawberry patch. We had a vegetable stand in the front of the house where we sold vegetables, blackberries, strawberries, blueberries, jams, and jellies. Mother also sold some milk and eggs to the neighbors. Father returned from Turkey in 1933, bringing Mother's sister, Louisa, to live with us. Aunt Louisa was a sweet, kindly lady. She was never married. She was a great help to Mother and a lovable addition to our family. Father and Henry were always busy going out into the woods to cut down trees, split wood, and stack it in the shed for the winter. We had a hand push cart with 2 big wheels to put the wood in. The 2 dogs always went with them. Christmas at Norton was a joyous occasion. Because I didn't have much money to buy presents for the family, I usually started knitting early in the fall. Argyle socks for my brothers and mittens or gloves for the children and scarves for the women. We would find a nice tree on our property and cut it down for a Christmas tree. Mother would cook a huge turkey and all the family would come together. Those were very happy days. Public schools in Norton consisted of the elementary school on the 1st floor and the high school on the 2nd floor of a large old wooden building. There was a common playground in the back of the school with a separating fence in the middle to keep the boys and girls apart. There was a boy in high school who used to send me notes from the 2nd floor via paper airplanes telling me that he wanted to go out with me. One day he came to see me at my house. He rode a motorcycle and wore a leather jacket. He asked me to go to the senior prom with him. My parents objected very strongly, but decided to let me go if my brother Jack would come with me to chaperone. It was embarrassing for me, but I wanted to go to the dance, so Jack came too. When I was in high school, all of the girls dressed up. That is to say, we wore a skirt, a sweater, a blouse, and a pair of shoes with heels. One day in class, I slipped off one of my shoes. It was on the floor under the desk. One of the smart aleck boys in back of me took the shoe and threw it out the window. This stirred a commotion, and the teacher made me stay after school, thinking it was my fault. The teacher was very angry and hit me with a stick. I had never been struck before, and when I got home, I was in tears. Explaining to my parents what had happened, father was furious. He called the teacher and made an appointment with him made an appointment to see him that evening. He took me with him, and he made the teacher apologize to me, and he warned him never to lay a finger on his daughter again. My parents, dear friend, Dr. Ralph Harlow, who taught theology at Smith College at the time, came to Norton to visit us one summer. He influenced my parents to send me to Northfield Seminary because it was a very good school and because they gave special scholarships to missionary children. During my senior year at Norton High School, I went to Washington, D.C. with the senior class. They needed at least 25 students in order to get reduced rates for the trip. I had saved some extra money working after school, and I knew I would be going to Northfield and would not have a class trip of my own during my senior year. My best friend, Audrey Wiley, went too. We took a boat from Providence to New York City and then went by train to Washington. We stayed at a nice hotel, sightseeing during the day and visiting all the historic buildings and places. On the way back, we did some sightseeing in New York City. We went on board the Queen Mary, which was docked in the harbor at the time. Little did I know that I would travel on it coming back from England at the end of World War II. Attending Northfield was a wonderful experience for me, giving me much-needed self-confidence and a great foundation for any future career. I had to get all passing grades in every subject in order to get credit for my 2 years of high school. I did very well, with the exception of Algebra 2. I just squeezed by so that I could get credit for my high school math. One morning during my first year at Northfield, I was a junior then, we were told that there would be no classes that day, and we were to stay in our dormitory. We could not go outdoors for any reason. No one told us why, but as the morning progressed, we realized there was a very bad storm taking place. The wind was howling and the rain very heavy. It wasn't until the next day that we were told that a very devastating hurricane had swept through New England and that the Connecticut River Valley was among the hardest hit areas. We also learned that the chimney had collapsed in the dining room at Gould Dormitory and that one student was killed and one student was badly hurt. All the phone lines were down and there was no way we could get in touch with our parents. Because the radio had broadcast the bad news about the two students at Northfield, who were casualties of the storm, we had to fill out postcards addressed to our parents, telling them that we were safe and all right. These cards were airmailed to Boston, to Providence, and to New York to get to our homes faster. Trees were across many of the back roads, taking a week or more to clear all the debris away. This was the hurricane of 1938. In May of 1939, I was called by my house mother to my house mother's office. Miss McDonald told me that she had received a call from my home with a message that my mother was very sick and that my brother was on his way to pick me up and take me home. I quickly packed a suitcase, and when Jack arrived, I ran to the car to find out how Mother was. Jack told me that Father had died and that Mother was at the Rhode Hospital undergoing tests. He told me that Father had suffered a paralyzing stroke a week earlier and then a second one the night before that took his life. Ralph had been with him to care for him. An undertaker had prepared Father's body and returned it to our home in a casket. When we got home, Jack and I cleaned the house and set up the living room like a funeral parlor. When the guests arrived to come pay their respects, Jack and I served them tea and refreshments. Ralph and Alfred brought Mother home from the hospital, and they had to tell her on their way home that Father had died. Mother was quite sick and still and had to be on the couch. After the funeral, I had to return to Northfield for my final exams. Luckily, I passed all my exams and received credit for the Norton High School classes. However, after Father died, Mother's pension was cut in half, and I didn't know how I could return to Northfield for my senior year. Mother could not spare any money for me, so I wrote to the headmistress at Northfield and explained the situation. I was delighted to get word from her that I could return to school in September at no cost to me. I would be made a house officer, meaning being in charge of lights out, making sure that rules were kept, etc. I also did extra domestic work that paid a small stipend for spending money. Mother made a very pretty dress for me for a dance we had at Mount Hermon School. Even though I didn't have many nice clothes, I did have a lot of wonderful friends at Northfield. My mother and brothers came to my graduation in 1940. In the summer of that year, I decided to apply to the Rhode Island Hospital School of Nursing to train to become a nurse. I had looked after Mother for a while when she was sick, and I found that I enjoyed it. The year before, after Father died, I drove Mother to Elyria, Ohio, to visit Father's sister, Ophi, and his sister Mary's family, the Fays. On the way home, we stopped at Niagara Falls to view the sights.